Hey there, welcome back. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Before we slip into the shadows, like and subscribe to uncover more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where are you listening from and what time is it there. It really brings our community together. Now, dim the lights for that cozy vibe and stick around till the end. Let's dive into the unknown. I never thought I'd end up on a crab boat in the Bering Sea. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Commercial fishing is honest work, and somebody's got to do it. It's just that I always imagined myself doing something different with my life by 28. Maybe working in tech or finishing that engineering degree I started. Instead, I found myself signing a contract with Norland Fisheries for a 3-month stint on the Bitter Maiden, a 120-foot crabber operating out of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. Life has a way of humbling you. After my sister got diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma and the medical bills started burying my family, my 2 years of college credits meant nothing. What mattered was cold, hard cash. Commercial crab fishing in the Bering Sea is one of the highest-paying jobs you can get without a degree. Deckhands can pull in $20,000 to $50,000 for a single season if the catch is good. My sister needed treatment, and I needed money fast. The Bering Sea offered both. The hiring process was surprisingly quick. I submitted my application on a Tuesday through a maritime employment agency, had a phone interview on Thursday, and by the following Monday I was on a plane to Anchorage, then a puddle jumper to Dutch Harbor. The entire town smelled like fish and diesel fuel, a combination I'd grow intimately familiar with over the coming months. I met Captain Silas Frome at a dockside bar called the Rusty Anchor. He was in his late 50s, weathered and lean, with the kind of 1,000-yard stare you see in veterans. He looked me over with an expression somewhere between amusement and pity. "You ever worked on the water?" he asked, taking a pull from his beer. "I've been on boats," I replied, which was technically true if you counted a couple of lake fishing trips with my dad when I was 12. Silas snorted. "The Bering Sea isn't a lake, kid. It's a graveyard. Waves hit 60 feet in winter. Deck ice is up so bad you'll be chipping at it for hours just to keep from capsizing. Equipment fails. People die." He leaned forward. "You sure you want this?" I thought about my sister in that hospital bed, tubes running in and out of her arms. "Yeah, I'm sure." He studied me for another moment, then slid a folder across the table. "Fine. Sign the contract. We leave in 3 days. Oh, and one more thing." Silas pulled out a laminated card from his jacket pocket. Unlike the standard safety materials I'd been given by the agency, this card was hand-typed and worn at the edges, like it had been handled many times over many years. "These are the additional protocols for working aboard the Bitter Maiden," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "Consider them as important as any Coast Guard regulation. More important, actually." The card listed 7 rules. Rule 1. During active fishing, one crew member must remain below deck in the galley between the hours of 2:00 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. Under no circumstances should all crew be on deck during this window. Rule 2. If St. Elmo's fire appears on the masts or rigging, do not look directly at it. Continue your work and hum or whistle a tune continuously until it fades. Rule 3. If a pot comes up containing only white crabs, pure white, not pale or albino, throw the entire catch back immediately. Do not keep a single specimen. Do not touch them with bare hands. Rule 4. If you hear someone call your name from the water, do not acknowledge it. Do not look toward the source. Report it immediately to the captain or first mate using the phrase "phantom hail on the port side" or "phantom hail on the starboard side" as appropriate. Rule 5. The forward hold, Section D, is off limits to all crew except the captain and first mate. If you must enter for emergency repairs, announce your presence loudly and clearly before crossing the threshold. Rule 6. If the ship's compass spins backward, stop all operations immediately. Gather in the galley and wait for the captain's instructions. Do not attempt to navigate or operate equipment. Rule 7. If you see lights beneath the waves that pulse in rhythm, specifically 3 short pulses followed by 2 long, turn your back to the water and return to the wheelhouse immediately. Under no circumstances should you watch them for more than 10 seconds. I read the rules twice, waiting for Silas to crack a smile and tell me it was some kind of hazing ritual for new deckhands. But his expression remained dead serious. "These are non-negotiable," he said firmly. "Violation of these protocols has resulted in incidents, lost crew, strange malfunctions. You follow these rules to the letter, and you'll come home with your pay and your sanity. Understood?" "Is this some kind of superstition thing?" I asked carefully. "Like not whistling on a ship or bringing bananas aboard?" Silas's eyes went cold. "Kid, I've been fishing these waters for 32 years. I've seen things that would make you piss yourself. These aren't superstitions, they're survival procedures. Now, do you understand them or not?" I nodded slowly, feeling a flutter of unease that I tried to push down. "Yeah, I understand." "Good, sign at the bottom." I signed, telling myself that every profession had its quirks. Maybe this was just how things worked in the Bering Sea, where the environment was already hostile enough to kill you in a dozen different ways. Strange rules probably helped maintain discipline and focus. The Bitter Maiden was smaller than I'd expected, with a rust-streaked hull and equipment that looked like it had survived multiple decades of abuse. The wheelhouse rose 3 stories above the deck, crowned with a tangle of antennas and radar equipment. 6 massive crab pots, steel cages weighing about 800 pounds each, were stacked on the deck, alongside hydraulic systems, sorting tables, and the enormous crane used to launch and retrieve the pots. I met the rest of the crew the day before we shipped out. There was Otto Lundgren, the first mate, barrel-chested Norwegian in his 40s who spoke in grunts more than words. Vincent Marlowe, the engineer, was a wiry guy in his 30s with grease perpetually under his fingernails and a nervous energy that never seemed to quit. The cook, Luther Grimsby, was an older black man with gray in his beard who moved with the careful deliberation of someone who'd spent decades compensating for a ship's role. Then there was my fellow deckhand, Cole Hartwick. He was maybe a year or 2 older than me with the build of someone who'd done hard physical labor most of their life. Unlike the others, Cole actually seemed friendly, giving me a genuine smile when we shook hands. "First time on a crabber?" he asked. "That obvious?" "You're not walking with the lean yet," he said, demonstrating a slight slouch to one side. "After a few weeks, your body adjusts to compensate for the role. You'll develop it naturally." "You seen the special rules?" I asked quietly, not sure if it was something I was supposed to discuss. Cole's expression shifted subtly, the friendliness dimming a few degrees. "Yeah, you read them?" "Just yesterday." "Follow them exactly," he said, his tone serious now. "Don't try to be a hero or curious or clever about them. Just follow them. It's safer that way." I wanted to press for more information, but Otto shouted for us to start loading supplies, and the moment passed. We left Dutch Harbor at dawn on a gray October morning. The forecast called for moderate seas and decent weather, by Bering Sea standards anyway, for the first week of our trip. Our destination was a fishing ground about 180 miles northwest, an area that Silas claimed had been particularly productive the past 2 seasons. My first week was a blur of exhaustion, nausea, and backbreaking labor. I learned to bait pots with chopped herring, maintain the hydraulic systems, and sort crabs by size and sex with speed born of repetition. The work was brutal, but I started to find a rhythm. The seasickness faded after the third day, replaced by a bone-deep fatigue that came from working 18-hour shifts in freezing conditions. The ocean was nothing like I'd imagined. The Bering Sea wasn't blue or even gray. It was a roiling mass of slate-colored water that seemed actively hostile to human presence. Waves came at unpredictable intervals, ranging from 6-foot swells to occasional monsters that towered 20 feet above deck level. The temperature hovered around 35 degrees, and the wind cut through every layer of clothing I owned. But the money was real. We were pulling good catches of king crab, and Captain Silas seemed pleased with our progress. If we maintained this rate, I'd walk away with enough to cover my sister's next 3 months of treatment, plus some cushion for bills. That thought kept me going when my hands went numb and my back screamed from hauling pots. It wasn't until our 8th night at sea that I experienced the first rule in action. I'd been assigned to galley watch that night, which meant staying below deck from 2 hazard a.m. to 4:30 a.m. while the rest of the crew worked above. At first, I'd been relieved. The galley was warm and dry, and I could catch a brief rest on one of the benches. But as 2 a.m. approached, I noticed the other crew members growing tense. "Remember," Otto said gruffly, as the deck crew prepared to pull a line of pots. "You stay below until 4:30. Don't care what you hear, don't care what happens, you stay." "What am I listening for?" I asked. He didn't answer, just headed up to the deck, leaving me alone in the galley. The first hour passed quietly. I made coffee, reheated some of Luther's fish stew, and tried to read a water-damaged paperback I'd found wedged behind the microwave. The ship rolled through the swells with its familiar rhythm, and I could hear the muffled sounds of work from above. Hydraulics whining, men shouting, the crash of crab pots hitting the deck. At 2:47 a.m., according to the galley clock, something changed. The sounds from above stopped. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had hit a mute button on the world. The hydraulics went silent. The shouts ceased. Even the wind seemed to have vanished. I stood up from the bench, my neck prickling with unease. My first instinct was to head up to the deck and make sure everything was okay, but Otto's warning echoed in my head. "You stay below until 4:30, and then I heard it. Knocking. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hull itself. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more knocks. The sound seemed to travel along the metal walls, moving from the bow toward the stern. It was too rhythmic to be random wave action, too purposeful. I remained frozen, listening as the knocking continued its progression around the ship. When it reached the galley's exterior wall, maybe 6 feet from where I stood, it stopped. Silence. My heart hammered in my chest. Then, softly, barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears, I heard humming. A woman's voice, melodic and distant, humming a tune I didn't recognize. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating through the hull. The temperature in the galley dropped noticeably. My breath fogged in front of me, despite the heater running at full blast. I thought about Rule 4, about hearing your name called from the water. This wasn't exactly the same, but it felt related, like whatever was out there was testing, probing, looking for a response. I stood perfectly still, barely breathing, until the humming finally faded. The temperature rose gradually, and, with a sudden lurch that nearly knocked me over, the normal sounds of the ship returned. Hydraulics groaning, men shouting, wind howling against the wheelhouse. At exactly 4:30 a.m., Cole came down the ladder into the galley. He took one look at my face and nodded knowingly. "First watch," he said. It wasn't a question. "What the hell was that?" I asked, voice shakier than I wanted to admit. "The quiet hours?" he replied, pouring himself coffee with hands that I noticed trembled slightly. "That's why someone always has to stay below. Whatever's out there, it has less reach if there's someone maintaining the interior. That's what Silas says anyway." "Whatever's out there," I repeated. "What does that mean?" Cole glanced toward the ladder, making sure we were alone. "Look, I've been on the Maiden for 2 seasons now. I've learned that some questions don't have good answers. The rules exist for reasons we don't need to understand. We just need to follow them. But people have seen things, right? That's why the rules exist in the first place?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah, people have seen things. And some people who broke the rules, they're not around anymore to talk about it." When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I climbed up to the deck exhausted and rattled. The sky was beginning to lighten, revealing a gray and choppy sea that stretched to the horizon in every direction. We were truly in the middle of nowhere, the nearest land over 100 miles away. That isolation had never felt more oppressive. Captain Silas was at the helm, steering us toward the next buoy marking our potline. When he saw me emerge, he called me over. "Cole said you handled galley watch well," he said, not taking his eyes off the instruments. "I stayed below like I was supposed to," I replied. "Good, that's the most important thing, following the protocols." He adjusted the throttle slightly. "I know it's strange. I know you want explanations. But the Bering Sea doesn't deal in explanations. It deals in survival. You follow the rules, you survive. You don't, you die. It's that simple." "What's out there, Captain?" I couldn't help asking. Silas was silent for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "This part of the ocean is old, kid. Old in ways that most places aren't. Things have happened here, things that left impressions, echoes. Some folks think the ocean floor around here is a graveyard for something that came before, something that doesn't like being disturbed." "Like what? A civilization? Ruins?" "I don't know, and I don't particularly want to know," he said firmly. "My job is to catch crab and bring my crew home alive. The rules help me do that. That's all that matters." He dismissed me to get some sleep, and I stumbled to my bunk in the cramped crew quarters. As I lay there, feeling the ship rock beneath me, I couldn't stop thinking about that humming, about the impossible silence, about the sense that something had been inches away from me with only a thin layer of hull between us. Over the next few weeks, I settled into the brutal routine of crab fishing. We worked rotating shifts, pulling pots, sorting catch, rebaiting, and deploying again. The catches were good, really good. We were consistently pulling 400 to 600 pounds of king crab per pot, well above the normal average. Silas was pleased, which meant everyone was pleased. The money was adding up. But the strange incidents continued, always at night, always subtle enough that I could almost convince myself I'd imagined them, if not for the fact that the other crew members clearly experienced them too. On my third galley watch, I heard footsteps on the deck directly above me. Slow, dragging steps that didn't match any crew member's gait. They paced back and forth for nearly an hour before finally stopping. Vincent, the engineer, mentioned seeing shadows moving in the water that didn't correspond to anything on the surface. Dark shapes that swam alongside the ship at impossible speeds. Luther refused to go on deck between 2 FAs and 4:30 a.m. under any circumstances, even if called. "I'm the cook," he'd say. "My place is in the galley, and that's where I stay during those hours. Silas knows this." Cole told me one night over whiskey that someone had smuggled aboard, about a deckhand 2 seasons ago named Garrett Ashford who'd violated Rule 4. He'd heard his dead father's voice calling from the water and had rushed to the railing to look. 3 crew members tried to grab him, but Garrett went over the side before they could stop him. They never recovered the body. "Thing is," Cole said, staring into his glass, "Garrett's father had been dead for 5 years. Died in Ohio, never been anywhere near Alaska. So how did whatever's out there know to use his voice?" I had no answer to that. It was our 19th night at sea when we experienced Rule 2. We were pulling pots under a clear sky, rare for the Bering Sea in October. The stars were incredibly bright, the Milky Way visible as a luminous band across the heavens. The air was bitterly cold, maybe 20 degrees, and the deck was slick with ice that we had to constantly chip away. I was working the sorting table with Cole, separating legal-sized crabs from undersized ones and females, when Vincent shouted from near the crane, "Fire! We've got fire on the mast!" My first instinct was panic. Fire on a boat is one of the worst possible emergencies. But when I looked up, I saw what he meant. Dancing along the top of the mast and spreading across the rigging were eerie blue-white flames, ghostly and beautiful. They flickered and moved like living things, casting strange shadows across the deck. St. Elmo's fire, a weather phenomenon caused by electrical fields in the atmosphere. "Don't look at it," Otto's voice boomed. "Eyes down, hum or whistle, now." I tore my gaze away from the mesmerizing flames and fixed my eyes on the crab in front of me. Following the rule, I started humming the first song that came to mind. Ironically, that same old Meow Mix commercial jingle that I'd used in my head years ago. Beside me, Cole was whistling something that might have been Amazing Grace. The instinct to look up was overwhelming. The flames cast shifting patterns of light across my hands and the sorting table, beautiful and terrible. My eyes kept wanting to drift upward, but I forced them, down, humming louder. That's when I heard the whispers. Soft at first, barely audible over the wind and the hydraulics. Multiple voices speaking in a language I didn't understand, coming from the direction of the mast. The more I listened, the clearer they became, and with creeping horror, I realized they were speaking in English. "Look at us," they said in unison, dozens of voices overlapping. "Look up, look and see what we are, look and understand." My head began to tilt involuntarily, muscles moving against my will. Panic surged through me, and I hummed louder, more forcefully, pressing my hands flat against the freezing metal of the sorting table to ground myself. "Louder!" Otto shouted. "Don't let them in." All of us began humming or whistling as loudly as we could, a discordant chorus that echoed across the deck. The voices from above grew more insistent, more frustrated, taking on an edge that made my teeth ache. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the St. Elmo's fire vanished. The blue-white flames extinguished all at once, plunging us back into normal darkness lit only by the ship's work lights. The whispers stopped. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my entire body shaking. "Good," Otto grunted. "You followed the rules, keep working." But I noticed his hands were trembling as he reached for the next crab pot. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, listening to the other crew members breathing and snoring, and I thought about those voices. They had wanted us to look. Desperately wanted it. And I had the distinct impression that if I'd given in and looked directly at that fire, something fundamental would have changed. Something I couldn't take back. The next morning, Captain Silas called a brief meeting in the galley before we resumed operations. "Last night was a close one," he said, looking at each of us in turn. "You all did well, but I need to know everyone's still solid. Anyone having doubts? Anyone thinking about cutting the season short?" Nobody spoke. The money was too good, and we were barely halfway through our contracted time. Silas nodded. All right, then remember, what happens on this boat, what you see and hear, it doesn't get discussed on shore. No internet posts, no stories at bars, nothing. That's in your contracts, but it bears repeating. There are some things that the wider world doesn't need to know about. Why? I found myself asking. If there's something dangerous out here, shouldn't people be warned? Silas fixed me with a hard stare. And say what, exactly? That the Bering Sea has ghosts? That there are ruins of something old on the ocean floor? That certain fishing grounds are haunted? He shook his head. Nobody would believe it, and it would wreck the entire industry. Thousands of people make their living out here. You want to take that away based on things we don't fully understand. But people have died, I pressed. You said so yourself. People die commercial fishing regardless, Luther interjected. It's the most dangerous job in America by the statistics. What happens on the Maiden isn't worse than what happens on any other boat. It's just different. The rules keep us safe, Otto added. That's what matters. I wanted to argue further, but the closed expressions on everyone's faces made it clear the discussion was over. We resumed fishing. The catches continued to be exceptional. I sent messages to my family via the ship's satellite email, keeping them brief and sanitized. Doing great, catches are good. Miss you all. How's Sarah doing? My sister's responses were encouraging. The latest round of chemotherapy was showing positive results. The doctors were optimistic. Every word of her emails made the hardship on the Maiden feel worth it. But the incidents continued, growing stranger and more frequent. Rule 3 came into play on our 26th day at sea. We were pulling pots from a new area, slightly east of our usual grounds. Silas had gotten a tip from another captain about strong catches in this spot. The first 3 pots came up normal, heavy with brown king crabs, a beautiful sight that meant good money. The 4th pot broke the surface, and Cole, who was operating the crane, suddenly stopped the lift. "Captain," he called out, voice tight. "You need to see this." Silas and Otto came to the rail, and I moved closer to get a look into the pot still dangling from the crane. It was full of crabs, completely full, but every single one was white. Not pale, not albino, pure, ghostly white, from their shells to their legs to their eyes. They moved sluggishly, clacking against each other with sounds that seemed too loud, too sharp. "Mother of God," Otto breathed. "Put it back," Silas ordered immediately. "Don't let it touch the deck. Don't open it. Lower it back into the water right now." Cole reversed the crane, and we all watched as the pot descended back into the dark water and vanished beneath the waves. "Cut the line," Silas said. "Captain, that pot's worth—" Vincent started. "Cut the line, now!" Otto pulled out a knife and severed the rope connecting the buoy to the pot, letting both sink into the depths. Silas turned to all of us, his face ashen. "We're moving. New grounds 50 miles north. Vincent, get the engine ready for full speed." As the Bitter Maiden's engine roared to life and we began churning away from that spot, I noticed that Captain Silas kept looking back at the water where we dropped the white crabs. His expression haunted. "What would have happened if we'd kept them?" I asked Cole as we secured the deck for the journey. He shook his head. "I don't know, and I don't want to find out. But Garrett, the guy I told you about, the one who went over the rail, he touched a white crab on a dare the week before. Said it burned his hand, left a mark that wouldn't heal. When he went in the water, the crew said they saw white shapes in the waves around him, hundreds of them. That night, I took my turn at galley watch again. During those quiet hours between 2 and 4:30 a.m., I heard that same humming from my first watch, but this time it was accompanied by what sounded like scratching on the hull. Methodical, purposeful scratching. like something was trying to mark or score the metal. I stood in the center of the galley, afraid to get too close to any of the exterior walls, and waited for the sounds to pass. They didn't stop until exactly 4:30. When Cole relieved me, he took one look at my face and poured 2 cups of coffee. "It's getting more active," I said. "Yeah," he agreed. "It does that sometimes. Silas thinks we might be fishing over something that doesn't like being disturbed." "Over what?" Cole hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Despite being in the middle of the ocean, he had photos and documents saved offline. He showed me an image of what looked like a sonar reading, dated from 3 years ago. The screen showed the ocean floor, but there were structures, geometric shapes, too regular to be natural formations. They stretched for miles according to the scale, a sprawling network of ruins at a depth of about 800 feet. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "One of the processors in Dutch Harbor. His brother works for NOAA, mapping the seafloor. This is from our fishing grounds. These structures are right beneath us." I stared at the image, my mind racing. Has anyone explored them? Not officially, but there are stories from old-timers, Aelid fishermen who've worked these waters for generations. They talk about the drowned city, a place that sank long before humans came to Alaska. They say that things still live there, waiting. Waiting for what? Cole took a long drink of his coffee. For people to be stupid enough to disturb them, I guess. The next morning, Captain Silas announced a change in plans. We were pulling up all remaining pots from our current grounds and moving to a new area entirely, about 120 miles west. "The catches are good here," Otto protested. "Why move?" "Because I said so," Silas replied sharply. "We've pushed our luck far enough. The rules are keeping us safe, but there's a limit. I can feel it. We've gotten too close to something." We spent the day retrieving pots and stowing gear. The work was exhausting, but I was grateful for the activity. It kept my mind occupied and away from thoughts of white crabs and underwater ruins and things that hummed from the depths. As we steamed toward our new fishing grounds, I stood at the rail, watching the sunset over the endless gray water. Vincent joined me, lighting a cigarette despite the wind. "You ever wonder why we do this?" he asked. "Risk our lives out here for crab?" "Money," I replied simply. "Yeah, but is it worth it? Look at Luther. He's been cooking on crab boats for 20 years. His back is shot, his hands have permanent nerve damage from the cold, and he's seen at least a dozen men die. But he keeps coming back." "Why does he?" Vincent shrugged. "I asked him once. He said, 'Because the ocean is honest. It'll kill you quick if you're stupid, but it won't lie to you. It won't pretend to be something it's not.' I think about that sometimes. Maybe that's why we're all here. Because life on land is full of lies and compromises. But out here, it's just you and the sea and the rules. Nothing else." He flicked his cigarette into the water and headed back inside, leaving me with those words. Our new fishing grounds were less productive, but Silas seemed relieved. "Normal catches," he said approvingly, as we pulled up pots with 200 to 300 pounds of crab. Good numbers, just not the exceptional ones we'd been seeing before. "This is sustainable." For almost a week, we had no unusual incidents, no quiet hours, no St. Elmo's fire, no strange sounds from the hull. The work was hard but routine. I started to relax, thinking maybe the worst was behind us. I should have known better. It was our 37th night at sea when everything changed. I was on deck working the sorting table with Cole around 11 p.m. The weather had turned rough, with 12-foot swells rolling in from the northwest and freezing spray coating everything in a slick layer of ice. Otto was operating the crane, bringing up our 6th pot of the night. As the pot broke the surface, I noticed something odd. The crabs inside were normal brown kings, but caught in the mesh with them were several objects that didn't belong. I grabbed a flashlight and moved closer. They were bones. Human bones. A femur, several ribs, what looked like a skull, partially crushed. "Captain," Otto's voice cracked as he shouted, "we got a problem." Silas emerged from the wheelhouse, and his face went pale when he saw the pot's contents. "Don't bring it aboard," he ordered. "Leave it hanging, everyone to the wheelhouse. Now." We crowded into the small wheelhouse, all of us shaken. Through the window, we could see the crab pot swaying in the wind, bones gleaming white among the writhing crabs. "Those looked old," Luther said quietly. "Really old." Silas pulled out a battered logbook and flipped through pages. "Last time we pulled up bones was 7 years ago. Different crew. We lost 2 men that season. One went overboard during a storm, and the other..." He paused. "The other jumped, said something was calling him." "We need to throw them back," Otto said, "like the white crabs." "No," Silas replied, voice hard. "That pot has $1,000 worth of crab in it. We sort out the bones, document them, and report them to the Coast Guard at the end of the season. We follow proper procedure." "Captain," Cole spoke up, "I don't think that's a good idea." "I'm not asking your opinion," Silas snapped. "We do this right. Otto, you and Vincent sort that pot. Bag the bones separately. Everyone else back to work." Otto looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded and headed back out to the deck with Vincent. Cole and I exchanged worried glances but followed. The next 20 minutes were tense as Otto and Vincent sorted through the pot, carefully extracting bones and placing them in a heavy-duty plastic bag. The remains appeared ancient, weathered and encrusted with marine growth. I counted at least 3 or 4 individuals based on the duplicate bones. As soon as the pot was empty and rebaited, we deployed it again and continued our operations. But the atmosphere on the boat had changed. Everyone was on edge, jumping at sounds, looking over their shoulders. At 2:00 a.m., Cole went below for galley watch, and I remained on deck with Otto. We were pulling another line of pots, working in tense silence. That's when the compass in the wheelhouse started spinning backward. I noticed it first through the window, the needle rotating counterclockwise, slowly at first, then picking up speed until it was spinning like a top. "Otto!" I called out, pointing. He looked, and his face went gray. "Rule 6, everyone to the galley, now." He hit the intercom button. "All crew to galley immediately. Stop operations. This is not a drill." Within minutes, all 6 of us were crammed into the galley. Silas, Otto, Luther, Vincent, Cole, and me. The captain sealed the door and locked it, then pulled out the laminated rule card. "How long do we wait?" I asked. "Until it stops," Silas replied. "Could be 10 minutes, could be hours." We sat in tense silence, listening to the ship creak and groan around us. The engine was still running, keeping us positioned against the current, but otherwise, we were dead in the water. After about 15 minutes, the lights began to flicker. Not dimming like they did during the quiet hours, but strobing on and off, rapidly, creating a disorienting strobe effect. "Stay calm," Silas commanded, but I could hear the strain in his voice. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant booming from below, from the keel, or maybe even deeper, from the water itself. It pulsed rhythmically, 3 short booms, 2 long ones. The same pattern from Rule 7. "Don't look out the windows," Otto said urgently. "Don't look at the water." But my eyes were already drawn to the galley's small porthole, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Beneath the waves, glowing with that same eerie bioluminescence, were lights. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe, stretching as far as I could see into the depths. They pulsed in perfect synchronization. 3 short pulses, 2 long, and they were rising. I tore my gaze away, but not before I saw shapes among the lights. Structures, towers, an entire city glowing with that ghostly light ascending from the ocean floor. "It's real," I whispered. "The ruins, they're real." "Don't look." Silas grabbed my shoulder and physically turned me away from the window. "Nobody look." The booming grew louder, and the ship began to vibrate. Objects rattled in cupboards. Cups fell from their hooks. The coffee pot shattered on the floor. And then I heard the voices. Not the whispering from the St. Elmo's fire, but clear, distinct voices speaking in English. "Return what was taken. Bring back what was removed. The bones belong below." They came from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, a chorus of demands that made my skull ache. Silas's face had gone pale, but his jaw was set. "We don't negotiate with..." The ship lurched violently to port, a movement that had nothing to do with waves. We were thrown against the bulkhead, and I heard the terrible sound of metal grinding against metal from below. "They're pulling us down," Vincent gasped. The ship tilted further, water beginning to pour through the sealed door's bottom edge. "Where are the bones?" Otto demanded. "Where did you store them?" "Forward hold," Silas replied. "Section D. Section D. The off-limits area from Rule 5. Otto and Silas locked eyes, some silent communication passing between them. "We have to give them back," Otto said. "That's human remains," Silas argued. "There are protocols, investigations." "Captain, they're going to take us all down if we don't," Cole shouted. The ship tilted another 10 degrees. Equipment crashed from shelves. The lights went out entirely, plunging us into darkness broken only by the pulsing glow from the windows. Silas swore viciously. "Fine, Otto, with me. The rest of you stay here." "I'm coming too," I heard myself say. "Like hell you are." "You need someone to carry the bag while you two navigate. 3 is faster than 2. Silas stared at me for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Let's go." We moved through the tilting ship. The floor slanted at an increasingly dangerous angle. Water was coming in somewhere. I could hear it rushing through lower compartments. The pulsing lights from outside cast bizarre shadows through every porthole. Section D was at the forward part of the ship, past the crew quarters. As we approached, I saw why it was off-limits. The door was reinforced, with multiple locks and a sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." Silas pulled out a keyring and began unlocking them one by one. Rule 5 exists because this section is different. The hull here is thinner, older. It was part of a different ship that we salvaged and integrated. We don't fully understand why, but it's a weak point. The final lock clicked open, and Otto pulled the door wide. The smell hit me first, salt and decay and something else, something ancient and wrong. The interior of Section D was cramped and dark, lit only by our flashlights. And immediately I understood why this place was forbidden. The walls were covered in marks. Not random scratches, but deliberate symbols carved into the metal. They were similar to markings I'd seen on the sonar images Cole had shown me. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift when I looked at them directly. "Don't touch the walls," Otto warned. "Just grab the bag and let's go." The bag of bones was stored in a footlocker bolted to the floor. Silas opened it, and I reached in to pull out the plastic bag. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt a jolt. Not electrical, but something deeper, like touching a live wire connected to my nervous system. Images flooded my mind. A city, massive and alien in architecture, thriving beneath the waves. Beings that were almost human, but not quite. with elongated limbs and eyes adapted to darkness. And then, catastrophe. The city sinking, not into the ocean but through it, into some deeper place where reality grew thin. The survivors waiting in that in-between space, sustained by something that defied understanding. Reaching up through the years, through the centuries, whenever anyone disturbed the remains of what they had been. I gasped and nearly dropped the bag, but Otto steadied me. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It hits everyone that way, come on." We made our way back through the ship, which had tilted to nearly 30 degrees now. The voices were everywhere, chanting, demanding, pleading. Return what was taken. We reached the deck and I saw that Cole and Vincent had already prepared. The crane was powered up and a pot was ready to be loaded. "Put them in the pot," Silas ordered. I placed the bag of bones into the pot and immediately the ship's lurching stabilized slightly. The voices dropped in volume, becoming less frantic. "Lower it," Silas commanded, "all the way to the bottom." Otto operated the crane, and we watched the pot descend into the glowing water. The lights below pulsed brighter, more urgently, 3 short and 2 long, over and over. The pot vanished into the depths. We waited, not breathing, as the cable continued to unspool. At 600 feet, the pulsing light suddenly changed pattern. Instead of the 3-2 rhythm, they began to pulse in waves, rippling outward from a central point. And then, between one pulse and the next, they went dark. All of them. Thousands of lights extinguished simultaneously. The ship rolled back to level with a groaning of stressed metal. The compass in the wheelhouse stopped spinning and settled back to normal. The voices ceased. We stood on deck in silence, exhausted and shaken. "Reel up the pot," Silas finally said. When the pot broke the surface, it was empty except for a strange residue coating the mesh, a phosphorescent slime that glowed faintly green. The bones were gone, accepted by whatever dwelt in the ruins below. Luther appeared on deck, pale and shaken. "Captain, we have flooding in the lower compartments. Nothing critical, but we need to pump." "Do it," Silas ordered. "Otto, check the hull integrity. Vincent, full systems diagnostic. Cole and..." He paused, looking at me. "What's your name, kid? I mean, your actual name. I've been calling you kid for over a month." "Fletcher," I replied. "Fletcher Dumont." "Cole and Fletcher, secure the deck. We're heading back to port. This season's over." "Captain, we're 3 weeks from quota," Otto protested. "I don't care. We're done. We pushed too far, disturbed something we shouldn't have. Another week out here and someone's going over the rail." Silas looked at each of us. We broke a rule. Not one of the 7, but an older one. Respect the dead. We treated those bones like cargo instead of remains. That was my call, and it almost killed us all. So we're going home. Nobody argued. The journey back to Dutch Harbor took 4 days. We maintained the rule protocols and there were no further incidents. The quiet hours between 2 and 4:30 a.m. remained quiet. The compass behaved normally. We saw no lights beneath the waves. But something had changed in all of us. We were quieter, more subdued. Luther, who usually hummed while cooking, worked in silence. Vincent barely spoke except for necessary communication. Even Cole, normally friendly and talkative, kept to himself. On our final night at sea, I stood at the rail watching the sunset. Captain Silas joined me, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He offered me one, and we stood in comfortable silence for a while. "You did well, Fletcher," he said eventually. "Better than most first-timers. You followed the rules when it mattered." "What exactly is down there, Captain?" I asked. "The truth." Silas took a long sip of his coffee before answering. "I don't know the whole truth. I'm not sure anyone does, but I've been fishing these waters long enough to piece together some things. There was something here before us, before humans came to Alaska. Maybe before humans existed at all, a civilization, maybe, or something like one. Something adapted to the deep. He gestured to the darkening water. The ocean is the oldest part of Earth, Fletcher. The continents shift and change, but the oceans remain. And in places like this, where the Bering Shelf drops off to the Aleutian Basin, you have depths that have never seen sunlight, that have remained unchanged for millions of years. If something wanted to hide, to wait, to survive, this is where it would do it. But they're dead, I said. Whatever built those ruins, they're gone. Are they? Silas countered. We gave back the bones and they stopped. That suggests will, intelligence. Something is still down there in some form. The rules exist because generations of fishermen have learned, through trial and error and loss, how to coexist with it. We take the crab, which belong to the surface waters. We don't disturb the depths. We don't acknowledge their calls. We don't look at their lights, and in return they let us pass. It's insane, I said. Maybe, or maybe it's the most rational thing in the world, recognizing that we're not alone, that we're not the only things that claim the ocean, and that survival means knowing when to keep your head down and follow the rules. We docked in Dutch Harbor on a gray morning in late November. The crew scattered quickly, most heading to the bars or to crash in cheap motels. Silas settled our pay. I'd made $38,000 for 5 weeks of work, more than I'd imagined. Before I left the boat for the last time, Silas called me to his cabin. "You planning to come back next season?" he asked. I thought about my sister, whose latest tests showed the cancer was in remission. I thought about the crushing medical debt that remained. I thought about those quiet hours in the galley, the humming from outside the hull, the lights beneath the waves. "I don't know," I admitted. Silas nodded, unsurprised. "If you do, you'll have a place on the Maiden. You're solid, you follow rules, and you kept your head when things went wrong. That's rare." He pulled out a new laminated card and handed it to me. It was identical to the first one, except for a single addition at the bottom. Rule 8. The ocean keeps its secrets. So do we. "That's the most important one," Silas said. "We don't talk about what happens out there. Not to family, not to friends, not to reporters or researchers or anyone else. What you experienced, what you saw, it stays on the boat. Understood?" I looked at the card, at all 8 rules spelled out in stark black text. "People should know," I said. "They should be warned." "Warned about what?" Silas asked. "To avoid fishing in the Bering Sea? That would destroy thousands of livelihoods. To avoid the ocean entirely? Humans have been going to sea for millennia, and we'll keep doing it because we have to. The rules protect us. Silence protects everyone else from panic and fear they can't do anything about." He leaned forward. "Look, kid, I get it. You want to tell people, to make sense of what happened, but think it through. Who would believe you? What would it accomplish besides making you sound crazy and drawing unwanted attention to this boat and this crew?" I didn't answer because he was right. Who would believe stories about underwater ruins and voices from the depths? I'd barely believed it myself, and I'd experienced it firsthand. "The ocean is bigger than us," Silas continued. "Deeper. Older. It has its own rules, its own inhabitants, its own logic. We're just visitors taking what we can from the surface layers. As long as we remember that, as long as we respect the boundaries, there's room for all of us, humans and whatever else is down there." I took the card and slipped it into my pocket alongside the original. "I'll think about next season. That's all I ask." I flew back to Seattle, then caught a bus to Tacoma where my family lived. My sister Sarah looked better than she had in months, color back in her cheeks, smile genuine instead of forced. My parents cried when they saw the check I'd brought, enough to pay off a significant chunk of the medical debt and keep us afloat for the next year. "What was it like?" Sarah asked as we sat together on the back porch, her wrapped in blankets against the November chill. "Cold," I replied. "Dangerous. Hard work. But you'd go back." I thought about the rules, about the humming from outside the hull, about white crabs and St. Elmo's fire, and bones in a crab pot and lights beneath the waves. "Maybe," I said. She studied my face, her expression knowing. "Something happened out there. Something you're not talking about." "Every fishing trip has stories," I deflected. "Not like this. You have that look Dad used to get when he came back from his tours overseas. The look that says you've seen something that changed how you understand the world." I didn't answer, just sipped my coffee and watched the rain start to fall. That was 6 months ago. I spent the winter working construction, helping my dad's friend with a renovation project. The money was decent, but nothing like crab fishing. As spring approached and the fishing season started ramping up again, my phone rang. It was Captain Silas. "We're taking the Maiden out again in 3 weeks. King crab season opens May 1st. You in?" I thought about Rule 8, about secrets and silence and the weight of knowledge I couldn't share. "What are the conditions?" I asked. "Same as last time, same pay scale, same crew mostly. Otto, Luther, Vincent, and Cole all signed on again. And same rules." "All 8 of them?" "All 8? Silas confirmed. "Non-negotiable." I was quiet for a long moment, feeling the pull of the ocean even from 2,000 miles away. The memory of those lights beneath the waves, the humming, the voices. All of it should have terrified me enough to never set foot on a boat again. But I also remembered the clarity of it, the honesty, like Vincent had said. Out there, the rules were simple and absolute. Follow them and survive. Break them and face the consequences. No gray areas, no politics, no pretense. Just you and the sea and the things that lived beneath it. "I need to know something first," I said. "That night with the bones, with the lights. Has that ever happened before?" Silas was quiet for a moment. "Twice. Once in 1987 before I was captain. They brought up bones and tried to keep them, and the boat went down. Only 2 survivors out of a crew of 8. And then, in 2003, my second season as captain. We had a similar situation, but I was smart enough to return them immediately. We still lost a man, though. Jumped overboard 3 days later, said something was calling him home." "And you still fish those waters?" "Where else would I go?" Silas replied, and I heard the resignation in his voice. "I've been fishing the Bering Sea for 32 years. It's all I know. And the truth is, Fletcher, those grounds are the most productive. The crab populations there are sustainable, healthy, abundant. It's almost like..." He trailed off. "Like they're being cultivated," I finished. "Like something down there is maintaining them." I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, sometimes it feels that way. Like there's a system, an ecosystem that includes us. We take our share from the surface, we follow the rules, we respect the boundaries, and the fishing stays good. It's a bargain, maybe, an old bargain that nobody remembers making but everyone still honors. I thought about my sister, about the bills that would start accumulating again as soon as my construction work dried up. I thought about my parents getting older, my dad's pension not stretching as far as it used to, and I thought about that moment in Section D when I'd touched the bones and seen that vision of the city beneath the waves. The sense of something vast and patient, waiting in the deep places where sunlight never reached. "I'm in," I said. "Good man, I'll email you the details." And Fletcher, welcome back to the Bitter Maiden." He hung up, and I sat there holding my phone, feeling like I'd just made a deal with something I didn't fully understand. Sarah found me there an hour later, still sitting with my cold coffee. "You're going back, aren't you?" she asked. "Yeah? Why? You have options now? You could finish your degree, find something on land. The money's better on the boat," I interrupted. "One season and we're completely clear of debt, maybe even have some savings." She sat down beside me. "It's not just about money, though, is it?" I looked at my sister, at her thin frame, still recovering from months of poison pumped through her veins to kill the cancer. She was alive because I'd gone to the Bering Sea, because I'd followed the rules and brought home that paycheck. "No," I admitted, "it's not just about money." "What is it then?" How could I explain it? The terrible clarity of standing on that deck at 2 a.m., knowing that something was humming just beyond the hull, knowing that your survival depended on following rules you didn't understand but couldn't question. The strange comfort in that certainty. "Purpose, maybe," I said finally. "Out there, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Follow the rules, catch the crab, come home. It's simple." "Simplicity that almost killed you," she pointed out. "We broke a rule, or violated a principle anyway, and we paid for it, but we survived because we made it right." I stood up, stretching. "I can't explain it better than that, but I'm going back." Sarah studied me with an expression that was part concern, part understanding. "Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll come back. I promise." But even as I said it, I wondered if it was a promise I could keep. 3 weeks later, I was back in Dutch Harbor, back on the Bitter Maiden, back in my cramped bunk in the crew quarters. The boat smelled exactly as I remembered. Diesel, brine, old coffee, and something else underneath it all. Something that probably didn't have a name. Cole greeted me with a handshake and a knowing smile. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" "Money's too good," I replied, the standard answer. "Sure," he said, but his eyes told me he understood there was more to it than that. Otto was his usual gruff self. Luther welcomed me back with a raised eyebrow and a fresh pot of coffee, and Vincent gave me a thumbs up from the engine room where he was already running diagnostics. Captain Silas called a meeting before we left port. All 6 of us crowded into the galley, and he pulled out the laminated rule cards, now with 8 rules instead of 7. "Same protocols as last season," he said. "But I want to be clear about something. What happened last time was my fault. I made a bad call, and it nearly cost us everything. This season, if anyone sees anything unusual, and I mean anything, you report it immediately. No trying to tough it out, no ignoring warning signs. We follow the rules exactly, and we don't take chances. Understood?" We all nodded. "Good, we ship out at dawn. Get some rest while you can." That first week back on the water was easier than I expected. My body remembered the work, the rhythm of the ship, the constant roll and pitch of the deck. We were fishing grounds about 150 miles northwest of Dutch Harbor, and the catches were good. Not exceptional like the previous season, but solid and consistent. The rules governed our days and nights, galley watches during the quiet hours, eyes down during St. Elmo's fire. White crabs thrown back immediately. Section D remained locked and avoided. The compass stayed true, and we saw no lights beneath the waves. It was almost boring, if you could call brutal physical labor in freezing conditions boring. Almost. On our 14th night, I was on deck with Otto when he suddenly stopped working and stared out at the water. "You hear that?" he asked. I listened. At first, I heard nothing but wind and waves. Then, faintly, I caught it. A sound like singing, distant and ethereal, coming from the direction of the open ocean. "Rule 4, I said immediately. "Phantom hail?" "Not exactly," Otto replied, still listening. "It's not calling names, just singing." We stood there for a moment, the sound growing slightly clearer. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, like the St. Elmo's fire had been beautiful, compelling, the kind of beauty that made you want to lean over the rail and look to find the source. "Captain," Otto called into his radio. "We got something on deck, not a rule violation yet, but close." Silas emerged from the wheelhouse, listened for a moment, then his expression hardened. "That's new. Everyone below deck except Lookout. Now." We gathered in the galley while Silas stayed at the helm, keeping the ship on course. The singing continued for nearly an hour, rising and falling with the wind. None of us spoke. We just sat there, listening, each of us fighting the urge to go up and look. When it finally faded, Silas came down looking shaken. "That's never happened before," he said. 32 years on these waters, and I've never heard singing that didn't have a source." "What do you think it means?" Vincent asked. "I think it means they know we're back," Silas replied. "And they're testing, communicating? I don't know, but we stay sharp, no mistakes." The rest of the season passed in a state of heightened tension. We had minor incidents, shadows in the water that didn't match anything on the surface, brief moments where the compass needle trembled, occasional cold spots on deck that had no explanation. But nothing that violated the rules directly. Nothing that forced a confrontation. Our catches remained good, and my bank account grew steadily. Every week, I sent money home, watching the debt shrink with each transfer. By the time we were 3 weeks from the end of the season, my family would be completely clear. Free. And yet, I found myself not thinking about going home. Instead, I thought about next season, and the season after that. I thought about learning to be a first mate, maybe eventually getting my captain's license. There were worse lives than this, following the rules, navigating the boundaries between the world above and whatever existed below. On our 53rd day at sea, Captain Silas called me to the wheelhouse. "I'm making some changes for next season," he said without preamble. "Otto's getting too old for this work. His back's shot, and he wants to retire while he can still walk. I'm offering you his position as first mate." I stared at him. "Sir, I've been on this boat for 2 seasons. There are guys with decades more experience." "Experience doesn't matter as much as temperament," Silas interrupted. "I need someone who follows the rules without question, but can also think on their feet when things go wrong. You've proven you can do both. You also understand what we're really dealing with out here. Not everyone gets that, even after years. What about Cole? Cole's solid, but he still hopes there's a rational explanation for everything. He wants to believe it's natural phenomena we don't understand yet. But you? You looked at those lights rising from the deep and you understood. There are rules because there needs to be rules. There are boundaries because there needs to be boundaries. You accepted that." I thought about it. First mate meant better pay, more responsibility, and deeper knowledge of whatever system governed the Bitter Maiden and its relationship with the things below. It meant becoming part of the machinery, like Silas had said. A gatekeeper. Someone who maintained the bargain. "If I accept," I said slowly, "will you tell me everything? The full history of this boat? What really happened those other times? What you actually know about what's down there?" Silas nodded. "Everything I know, which admittedly isn't everything, there is to know. But yes, full disclosure. That's part of becoming first mate. You need to understand the complete picture to make the right calls." "Then I accept." He extended his hand and we shook. His grip was firm, and I felt the weight of something passing between us. A mantle, a responsibility. Good. We'll make it official when we get back to port. For now, finish the season strong. We docked in Dutch Harbor on a morning in late June. I'd been at sea for 3 months and made $64,000. My family's medical debt was paid in full, with enough left over for a decent emergency fund and a down payment on a small house for my parents. My mother cried on the video call when I showed her the transfer receipts. My father just nodded, pride and relief mixing in his expression. Sarah smiled that knowing smile and said, "You're going back again, aren't you?" "Yeah," I admitted, "but this time as first mate. Better pay, better position. Just stay safe," she said. "Whatever's out there, don't let it take you." "I won't," I promised. But I wondered if that was true. Every time I went out on the Bitter Maiden, I was changed, a little more attuned to the deep, a little more aware of the things that existed in the spaces between the world I knew and the world that predated everything. Captain Silas kept his promise. Over the next 2 seasons, he taught me everything he knew about the rules and where they came from, observations and lessons learned from lost crew and failed expeditions going back over 100 years, about the history of the fishing grounds and the sonar readings that showed those impossible structures on the ocean floor. About the theory, never proven but widely believed among those who worked these waters, that something old and patient lived in the ruins, maintaining a silent compact with the humans who fished above. We take the crab. We respect the boundaries. We don't disturb the deep. And in return, we're allowed to pass. It's not a comfortable knowledge. There are nights when I stand at the rail during the quiet hours, feeling the ship rock beneath me and knowing that something is just beyond the hull, humming its ancient song. Nights when I see Cole or Vincent or whoever's new to the crew, and I wonder if I should warn them more directly, tell them to run while they still can. But I don't, because they need the money just like I did. Because the rules keep us safe if we follow them. Because someone has to maintain the bargain, generation after generation, keeping the balance between the world above and the world below. Last month, Captain Silas told me he's retiring after next season. He wants to recommend me for captain of the Bitter Maiden. "You understand what that means," he said. "You'll be responsible not just for the crew and the catch, but for maintaining the protocols, for training new people in the rules, for being the gatekeeper between what's up here and what's down there." I accepted. So if you're reading this, and you're thinking about commercial fishing in the Bering Sea, let me give you some advice. The money is real. The work is brutal but honest. And if you end up on a boat with strange rules that don't seem to make sense, you follow them anyway. Don't ask why you can't use lights during the quiet hours. Don't ask what happens if you look at St. Elmo's fire. Don't ask about the white crabs or the locked sections or the lights beneath the waves. Just follow the rules. Because out there in the Bering Sea, where the continental shelf drops away into depths that have never seen sunlight, where the ruins of something ancient rest in the cold and dark, there are bargains older than human civilization. And those of us who work these waters are part of maintaining them, whether we fully understand them or not. The ocean keeps its secrets, so do we. And if you ever see a job posting for the Bitter Maiden out of Dutch Harbor, Alaska, and you need the money bad enough that you're willing to ignore every instinct telling you to stay on land, well, read the rules carefully. Then decide if you're ready to follow them. Because once you cross that threshold, once you see what's really out there in the deep places, you're changed. You become part of the system, part of the machinery that keeps the boundary intact. And maybe, like me, you'll find that's exactly where you belong. I ship out again in 2 weeks. The king crab season opens and we have quota to fill. My first season as captain of the Bitter Maiden. I've already reviewed the rules, all 8 of them, and made sure every crew member has signed and understood them. The ocean is waiting. The things beneath it are waiting too, and somewhere between the surface and the depths, we'll navigate the space we've always navigated, taking what we need and respecting what we don't understand. It's a strange way to make a living, but it's honest work. And in the end, that's all any of us can ask for. And that's how it ended, or so we assume for now. If this tale kept you on edge, like and share it with a friend who dares to listen, then subscribe for more eerie nights like this one. Thanks for unwinding with me. Sleep tight if you can, and remember, follow the rules. Always.